Sad little operation. Okay. I'll find something on YouTube. So, we're going to take a look at this little haiku here when he talks about his feeling at work here. So he goes into work and he's again sort of relishing these wounds that he sports during his time at work. And then he's meant to sound a little bit unhinged here. Think about what we've just talked about and how fragmented and mad and bizarre he sounds at the end of chapter 7. Well, here's the outcrop of this. He says, still, I'm doing the little fax thing. I write little haiku things and fax them around to everyone. When I pass people in the hall at work, I get totally zen right in everyone's hostile little face. It's meant to seem kind of paradoxical and illogical, I think, here. I mean, how do you get zen right in everyone's hostile little face? And, there's something illogical about this because obviously the feeling of zen is meant to drain you of any sense of animosity and anger. And so his emotional state is paradoxical, which I think gives us an insight into his kind of psychological fragmentation. He's a bit mad here, and well, he's a bit mad all the way through, but I think it's kind of stylistic peak in this part of the book.
So then, is it that he's trying to be aggressively zen?
Yeah, exactly that. And that phrase is a paradox. How can you be aggressively zen? It doesn't even make sense. However, I've met some people who are aggressively zen. They do exist. Worker bees can leave. Even drones can fly away. The queen is their slave. So we have this bizarre little haiku, I think, that does have some, again, slightly dodgy gender politics going on here. It says, how does the haiku underline the narrator's conflict with society? Well, what do you think about this? The worker bees can leave. So if you think about this as perhaps himself in his corporate role, himself in corporate mode, and they can leave. He's talking here about empowerment, being able to get away from his horrible job and his sad and authentic existence. Even drones can fly away. You basically have the same idea repeated. But then the final line is the weird one. The queen is their slave. We know that worker bees have a kind of a matriarch. It's a rare social organisation that has the kind of matriarch as the dominant, all-powerful figure in a hive. And so it invokes that. But what it seems to do again is to give us this problematic sense of power being feminine, social power in some way being feminized, which is an unusual concept, and it's part of the book that I can't ever quite get my head around how anyone would imagine it this way.
But saying the queen is their slave, he's not saying that the power is feminine.
Or that it's going to be enslaved by the rebellion that he's imagining. That these drones and worker bees that fly away and leave, in the end, is going to enslave the queen, which is feminine. So there is, again, the positing of society itself and its power, its potentates, the people that wield power in society, as being female, and that the rebellion that he is imagining in his head as a sort of uprising against that female form of power. And that haiku, I think, deliberately structures this power as female, as feminine, and his reaction to it through Fight Club as a response to feminized power. And so we've got, again, the conflict with societies inflected through the lens of gender. It's about men and women here. We've got the conflict society, again, being inflected through the lens of gender in this little sample when he's aggressively zen in everyone's face. So remember here, this is the key thing to trace. We're not supposed to trust everything he says. We are supposed to approach him as an unreliable narrator, I think, in big parts of this book. And that Palahniuk is not here saying, the sentiments in this haiku are mine, and that this person telling this story is clearly normal and rational. Clearly he's not. And that these sentiments are the product partly of an illogical, rational mind that's disrupted. We move from a haiku onto degrading sex. It's an interesting segue. How does the degrading nature of the sex between Marla and Tyler function as an antidote for the perfection of the narrator's job? How does it underline his conflict with society? It says here, you give up all your worldly possessions and your car and go and live in a rented house in the toxic waste part of town where late at night you can hear Marla and Tyler in his room calling each other human butt wipe. Take it, human butt wipe. Do it, butt wipe. Choke it down. Keep it down, baby. Just by contrast, this makes me the calm little center of the world. Me with my punched out eyes and dried blood and big black crusty stains on my pants. I'm saying hello to everyone at work. Hello, look at me. Hello, I'm so zen. This is blood. This is nothing. Hello, everything is nothing, and it's so cool to be enlightened. Now, the question here is about the strange, kinky stuff that Marla and Tyler seem to function. But if we see this as an antidote to his job, why do you think it's in the style and manner that it is here, where they're calling each other human butt wipe? What's the logic behind that in this text? Why this phrase, do you think? Go on, you're on camera.
I mean, because it's like, I don't know, dirty. It's a change. It's a very, very big jump from the kind of sterile description that we've had of the workplace before.
How does it relate to the paper street setting, do you think?
The paper street setting has kind of emphasized the positive side, I guess, of the dirtiness.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the life within the dirt.
So there is a kind of vitality and degradation here that I think is being rendered through this bizarre kind of description of their sexuality. Remember, though, that this is still the narrator and that this is the consequence of it. That he's saying hello in capital letters to everyone at work. Hello, look at me. Hello, I'm so zen. This is blood. This is nothing. Hello, everything is nothing, and it's so cool to be enlightened, like me. So if this is going on and it's something positive, how might you see this as its consequence or product? This is the product of the weird, kinky stuff. What's the logic behind that? Why has this all made him all supposedly zen and calm? It's gross, the answer to this, which is probably why you're hesitating with it. Why would he be all zen and relaxed if Tyler, him, absolutely, is him? There is something cathartic, I think, about this bizarre sexual behavior here that has its ramifications in this passage here, where he's all calm and tranquil. He obviously thinks that it's nothing to... The two phenomena are not related, that Tyler is having degrading sex with Marla, and yet here he is, all kind of calm. Now, there's an extra layer of complexity to this, because if you keep telling yourself you're zen in capital letters, there is a suggestion that actually you're not, and that you're trying to reassure yourself about your own emotional state. So there is a type of self-reassurance in the style of this writing. I'm so zen, God, I'm so cool. Shouldn't everyone be like me? Why might that be the case? Why is he perhaps not as zen as he likes to believe? Why might he be retaining some sense of angst and frustration?
Because he doesn't want Marla and Tyler together.
He doesn't want them together, and the experiences are still not part of him. He firstly reacts with hostility to their sexual relationship, but also he hasn't reconciled this into his identity. So although it seems to be having this kind of bizarre effect of tranquilizing him in some way, there's a sort of conscious effort on his part to try and make it forceful. I'm so zen. I'm reassuring myself that I'm zen, because the experience isn't actually yet fully assimilated into his identity. And he seems in some way to be partly aware of this and uncomfortable about the experience, that there's something going on here that's a little bit bizarre and that he hasn't fully made sense of it yet. And so you've got this dual, again, this sort of ambiguity, that he seems calm because it's him sleeping with Marla and he's sort of got it out of his system, so to speak, but then isn't even aware of it fully, and so the zen that he does gain from it is forced. It's battling with the fact that it's not fully reconciled into himself. So it's not actually a successful type of catharsis. It's just something that is happening, but in some way isn't fully made sense of in his mind. Does that make sense? It's a bizarre little passage.
Can I shout at this little kids?
It's pointless because they'll disappear in about 30 seconds, and the shouting at them makes more noise than them. So the next thing is about the page is over. The next one, the next page, 65 to 66, bottom to midway. How does this section underline the connection between the narrator's internal conflict and his malfunctioning parental role models? So he says here, I embrace my own festering, diseased corruption, Marla tells the cherry on the end of her cigarette. Marla twists the cigarette into the soft white belly of her arm. Burn, witch, burn. Tyler's upstairs in my bedroom, looking at his teeth in my mirror, and says he got me a job as a banquet waiter part-time. At the Pressman Hotel if you can work in the evening, Tyler says. The job will stoke your class hatred. Yeah, I say, whatever. They make you wear a black bow tie, Tyler says. All you need to work there is a white shirt and black trousers. Soap, Tyler says. I say, we need soap. We need to make some soap. I need to wash my pants. I hold Tyler's feet while he does 200 sit-ups. To make soap, first we have to render fat. Tyler is full of useful information. Except for their humping, Marla and Tyler are never in the same room. If Tyler's around, Marla ignores him. This is familiar ground. This is exactly how my parents were invisible to each other. Then my father went off to start another franchise. My father always said, get married before the sex gets boring, or you'll never get married. My mother said, never buy anything with a nylon zipper. My parents never said anything you'd want to embroider on a cushion. So,
Oh, it's sad,
it is.
Oh,
So what we're trying to think about here is the logic of the internal conflict of the narrator and its connection to these sort of malfunctioning parental role models. He then, in this bottom section of the page, he makes the analogy here between Tyler and Marla and his parents. Why is this important, do you think? Tyler and Marla and his parents.
because it reveals us the fact that of why this type of relationship Marla and Tyler, which in this case Marla and him have,
Mm-hmm.
bothers him because he was always see, I was about to speak in Spanish. He was always used to having these types of insignificant relationship around also when he was a kid. So
Mm-hmm.
this bothers him, and we didn't know this before.
And also, he's seen the end of this relationship. He's seen how it ends and how it affects essentially the world around him because he was affected by it.
Absolutely.
So then that's probably not something that he wants to either let happen again or, I don't know, let affect each other.
Yeah, there is an important logical link between this fragmentary, failed parental relationship that he remembers and his fragmented psyche. So if you think about this, my father always said, get married before the sex gets boring or you'll never get married. My mother said, never buy anything with a nylon zipper. Why those two details juxtaposed next to each other? And what's the implied meaning of this juxtaposition, do you think?
The father is implying that women are just used to have sex, basically. That
Okay.
women have no value, and men are supposed to use them just to satisfy their desires.
Mm-hmm.
Practically.
And then his mom tells him
I
what?
don't know. I'm confused about this. Does this like imply that when maybe they met each other, or I don't know, something with an island zipper that is fun?
I think that like with the nouns of it has to do with like the quality of the product.
Okay.
Because and if I'm thinking of this correctly, nouns zippers, things that have nouns zippers at least aren't really that expensive.
No. Cheap
Nylon
consumer
zipper?
products.
What's it mean?
So, as parental archetypes, he's got a fairly macho father who sees women as sex objects, and a mother who is insisting on, as important, buying things with a nylon zipper.
Okay. So like, choose your husband wisely, something like that.
Well, I think we're probably even over-reading it as figuratively. Never buy anything with a nylon zipper is a fairly flat throwaway remark about a consumer product. So if you think of these as two archetypes that the narrator is supposed to have been exposed to for both genders, we start to see why he can't make sense of anything himself. Either you are domineering misogynist or you're a vacuous idiot talking about consumer goods.
So there's
Both of
nothing
these genders
behind
are
this.
coming under attack here, I think.
There's nothing behind this.
Never buy anything with a nylon zipper, I think, is a fairly flat throwaway remark that is the thing that he can remember about his mum. The thing that he can remember about his dad is just a simple piece of advice that's based on objectification. So then we come to, okay, well then why might we see that then as the reason for him being this way? Where he is envisioning himself sleeping with a woman as a parental relationship. So think about those parental archetypes. He's then seeing his actual sexual interaction with women. He's seeing his sexual interaction with women through the lens of this parental paradigm.
But everyone does this in a way.
Hang on.
No, sorry, not sexual interactions.
Whoa.
Not sexual interactions. I mean.
Explain.
Oh, sorry.
You're on
I didn't
YouTube.
want to see. Okay, no. Sorry, I didn't say this correctly. I mean, everyone tends, not regarding sex, like relationships in general,
Mm-hmm.
like mental attraction.
Yeah.
Okay. Like usually, like girls usually tend to either get a man who's very similar to their father or the complete opposite.
Okay.
It depends on the type of the relationship they have with their father. I think. No,
So I think that Freud would 100% agree with you that people end up replicating parental dynamics in their relationships, and that there is obviously an equivalence going on here between the narrator's envisioning of his sexual interaction with Marla through the lens, through the paradigm, through the kind of model that is provided by both of his parents. His parents are either vacuous consumers or misogynistic kind of objectifiers. There's no alternative in that parental paradigm. But why then, what's the logic behind him being so fragmentary and disorganized? If you see those two things as his parental archetype, he's either a virile, id-based, misogynistic objectifier of women or a vacuous, passive consumer. There's the two fragments of his psyche in his parental role models. He can't work out any way to reconcile the two together.
There's no middle ground.
There's nothing in between, again. And so what you see there is that the parental relationship is basically functioning as the logical cause of his personal fragmentation.
No, I'm confused.
Okay, so I think it's like he has to be either like within the psyche from his dad or the psyche from his mom. And like when he leaves, for example, the psyche from his mom, there's no middle ground that's kind of
He has to be either one of the other.
he has to be either one or the other, either hard or cold. And like when he leaves one, he has to jump all the way to the other.
Or jump all the way to the other and even fail to realize that he's doing it. That's it. That's why you have to add that to what I just said, because I said a load of pseudo-academic waffle and then Dubin explained it in normal language that you'd understand. But you see, that's why you have to chime in. It is a complex issue, but you can again see how the parental role models, the sort of failed parental role models in this novel are being justified, are being used, I think, as a sort of logical explanation for the narrator's personal fragmentation, his disorganized sense of self and his incoherent sense of self. Let's take a look at the bottom passage of this just before we end up here. It says, Tyler does 198 sit-ups, 199, 200. Tyler's wearing a sort of gummy flannel bathrobe and sweatpants. This is the part in the movie where he's actually wearing something different. Get Marla out of the house, Tyler says. Send Marla to the store for a can of lye, the flake kind of lye, not the crystal kind, just get rid of her. Me, I'm 6 years old again and taking messages back and forth between my estranged parents. I hated this when I was 6 and I hate it now. So, on the back of what Dubin said about him having to either oscillate between this extreme kind of misogynistic male position that Tyler seems to be occupying here, that's that part of his psyche, and then the passive, feminized consumer that he adopts at the beginning of the novel. Why is this phrase particularly important? I'm 6 years old again, taking messages back and forth between my estranged parents. Bear in mind that the characters that he's talking about are just him. What's this telling us about his mind? If he envisions him and his id through this lens of moving messages backwards and forwards between parents that won't speak to each other.
They're completely separated from one another.
Absolutely. And so the components of his psyche are as distant from each other as his dysfunctional parents were from each other. And the reason for his fragmentation being at its peak here is because he's attempting to reconcile components of his psyche that are at their most distant. Tyler is as far away from being a part of him here as he ever is in the book. He is at his most fragmentary in this sort of section, roughly towards halfway through the text. Importantly, why does this matter? In terms of a novel that's supposed to be about the development of a coherent self.
I mean, he's not developed.
Yeah. This is backwards, isn't it? There's something retrogressive about this, that he's somehow being infantilized by experiences that are trapped within his own mind. This is all taking place largely in the realm of his own mind. And the consequence of this is a type of infantilization. He's like a little child, mediating between parents that won't speak to each other because they're so both terrible. This is where the gender politics of this book get more complicated, though. It stops being such overtly, obviously hostile towards women. And there's something else being added into this, I think. It adds a layer of complexity because men are not getting away with stuff here. They're being blamed for being useless dads a lot of the time. And you'll see it kind of modifies gradually as we go through. I will record the rest of the explanations of this stuff.